Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids, and in today's video we've got some news on the summoning events coming this weekend. So we were quite disrupted because the last time we had a 2x event, it was supposed to be 2x sacred shards, but instead they did 2x void shards and ran that alongside a 10x Sifi the Lost Bride. So a lot of us were kind of wondering, okay, wow, we skipped sacred shards, went straight to void shards in the 2x. What's next? Usually the order is Sacred's Void Ancient. Would it be Ancients after the Void 2x? Are we just going back to Sacred? What is going to happen? So we can confirm right now that yes, this Friday and over the weekend, it is going to be 2x Sacred Shards, which is, I think, it's what I expected. It's the most likely outcome. I think that 2x Voids was like just a random weekend thrown in there that just sort of postponed the regular cycle. So yeah, it's going to be 2x Sacreds this weekend. I think 2 weeks after this, we'd expect 2x Voids. 2 weeks after that, 2x Ancients. But who the heck knows? I mean, they could always throw in like a 2x Primal weekend at some point as well. Now that there's, you know, more interesting mythical champs coming to the game, that's something they could do at some stage too. So who knows? I definitely think that our old standard 2x rotation is certainly looking to be mixed up a good bit. But not only do we have 2x Sacred Shards this weekend, which by the way will be overlapping a champion chase tournament, which will include fragments for Timid the Fool. So if you're looking to get your Timid, yeah, it's going to be involved in this as well. 2x Sacreds is a pretty good time to be holding Sacreds for especially earlier accounts. There's also going to be a 10x event on at the same time. For I think just from Sacreds. And we can, yes, just from Sacreds, there will be a 10x event. The 10x event should be on Friday, Saturday, but not on Sunday. So if you want to pull your Sacred Shards, but not for the 10x, you can do that on Sunday. The 10x, though, it is a new champion, and he's pretty cool. It's actually Crocmar the Devourer. So this champion is going to be featured in the 10x this weekend. It's actually a pretty good chance to get them. Again, rough rule of thumb, let's say approximately a 5% chance if you get a legendary from a Sacred Shard that it would be Crocmar the Devourer, roughly speaking. So 1 in 20 times when you get a legendary in 2x Sacreds, 10x Crocmar, 1 in 20 of those would be Crocmar. 19 in 20 would not be Crocmar. So yeah, it's not like, oh, the 10x isn't working. The 10x is always working, but just 10x is not very good, okay? But you can understand that. Nonetheless, if you want to get this champion, it's pretty much the best time to get it. There's probably never going to be a better time than 2x Sacreds with a 10x for this champ to get him. It's the most reliable time. Of course, you know, by objective measures, the most reliable time is still not super reliable. What do we think about Crocmar, though? So I actually used Crocmar in my Timid showcase on the test server. And a lot of people seem to be really impressed in the comments. Like I saw one comment which is like, this is a Crocmar showcase, not a Timid showcase. So you guys seem to really like this champ. He's got good base stats. So he is HP, and he's a HP-based damage dealer. He's got good base HP, actually good base defense, which is important as well. It helps make them tanky, which is one of the big draws, really, of HP-based damage dealers, is that they're very survivable, which is very valuable in Arena. They typically do less damage than attack, well, nearly always do, apart from Taras. Taras is ridiculous. Let's ignore Taras. They typically do less damage than attack-based nukers, but they trade that off for being very, very tanky. But he's got good base speed at 102 as well. That's decent. 63% crit damage. That's the top end of crit damage for legendaries, which is good. Even a bit of resistance, which is nice. So yeah, he's honestly looking pretty solid. We look at his kit. So his A1 is pretty interesting. Attacks one enemy, then all enemies one time if the first attack is critical. So this is pretty cool. It's nearly always going to be an AoE attack, basically. So it's sort of like Foley's A3 in a sense. You're going to do pretty good damage to a single target, and then you're going to do sort of like low medium AoE damage, but it's on an A1. So every counter attack, every ally attack, anything like that is going to proc this, which is pretty nice. His A2, Gnashing Bog, is an AoE attack, gives him a shield equal to 20% damage inflicted, and heals him by 10% for each critical hit. So again, in most circumstances, let's say there's 4 enemies in Hydra, Arena, whatever, it's a 40% max HP heal, which is a lot. It's going to give him a big shield as well, and it does hit harder than his A1. That's got a 3-turn cooldown, so decent. His A3 is interesting as well. 30% crit rate, 30% crit damage for 3 turns with an extra turn on a 4-turn cooldown. So this is basically going to be up all the time. for him and also for your team. So you could maybe do some interesting team builds. Certainly you could build him with like 70% crit rate and just use this buff to do it. The risk, of course, the benefit of that is it's easier to gear and you can gear him for more damage. The downside is if increased crit rate is stripped off, or if, you know, they lock you out of your skills, or whatever, you counter attack before you've put this buff on, you might not get that extra attack on his A1. That's sort of the big downside there, I suppose. So that's an interesting move for sure. And then his passive is definitely, I think, probably the most exciting part. Whenever he attacks, decrease the target's attack or defense by 5%, as well as their accuracy or resistance by 5%, depending on which stat is the highest, stacking up to 30%. Now that is really, really good. So potentially lowering their attack-based nukers attack by up to 30%. They're going to hit much more, much weaklier, much more weakly. I don't know what's the right way to say that. They're going to hit much weaker. Let's say it like that. I definitely think reducing their defense is pretty big. So, you know, against those tanky revivers, against more of a stall type team, you know, he's pretty quickly, everything is an AoE really, he's pretty quickly going to stack that up to a 30% defense reduction. That's pretty big. You're going to hit much harder. It's going to help you crack through those tanky teams. That's nice. And also reducing their resistance, the accuracy of their debuffers. It's a pretty nice set of skills. So that is kind of cool. Now, if we jump over to Hell Hades, just to look at the multiplier, so you get an idea of this. His multipliers aren't super high, okay? So his A1 has a 0.18 multiplier. Now that's going to do, again, it's decent damage against a single target, but like it's not going to hit crazy hard. He's got a 0.3 multiplier on his A2, his AoE, which again is a decent hit, but it's not crazy. I think a lot of his damage is really going to come from the passive and stacking that up. So he's definitely not a, you know, nuke them and blow them up in one hit type of champion. Not that at all. This is definitely a champion that's more like, in a longer fight, I'm going to just wear you down with constant AoEs and stacking this penalty on you. Because there's nothing you can do about this, right? There's no way around Voracious Hunger. It's just something that builds up over time. Now, for instance, like Mother Cybele, kind of underrated as a nuker. Now, her HP and her crit damage are lower, but nonetheless, like you could have her just spam her A1, right? She has a 0.2 multiplier on her A1, which is an AoE attack, gives her turn meter and that chance of decreased speed. So Mother Cybele, I think you get pretty comparable damage out of these two champions. Now, if you want to place the decreased speed, you build her with accuracy, but should give you a pretty good idea, right? To put it in context, Mother Cybele is not thought of really as a damage dealer, but she can do some surprising damage. If we look at Magnar, to put that in context, it would be, we're not going to look at Taras. That's just silly. Magnar over here. Search for that. Magnar, to put that in context, search for Magnar. Does it want to open? There we go. Again, he's got 20k, so similar base HP, 50% crit damage. Magnar is going to come in with Percussive Pound, which is a 0.22, but this hits twice. And he also has 10% more damage from Book. So you're looking at 0.44 plus an extra 10%. So Magnar is hitting realistically significantly harder on his upfront nuke than Crocmar, right? 0.44 or 10% versus the 0.3. Crocmar has the advantage of 13% extra crit damage, about 10% more base HP. He can give himself the 30% crit damage buff. You could maybe build him with 70% crit rate. Put this all together. How does he look? I actually think this champion looks pretty solid. I think he looks pretty good. This is a champion I'd be very happy to get, honestly. Like, if he was a guaranteed champ, I think I'd definitely go for it. I think he's really fun. I think he's really cool. He definitely has potential, I think, in Arena as a decent damage dealer with a very strong passive, which I think really suits, you know, more tankier go second type teams. I think, you know, he's not going to hit quite as hard as Magnar, but he's not going to be massively far off. Honestly, between his base stats, he can have a legendary blessing. Ultimately, you could empower him. The faction Guardians is stronger, depending on where you're at. You could do some interesting team building stuff with this as well. I think there's a lot of cool stuff, honestly, going on with Crocmar. I think he's pretty fun. I think it's unlikely he's going to, you know, be top arena meta, right, with Taras Marishka, but I do think he's strong. I ran him with Timit and Kaja, for example, And I found he was really strong with Timid and Kaja. Because Timid Kaja, the duo, they've got great control and speed and stuff, but they don't bring increased attack or defense for your attack or defense-based nukers. They do very well with a HP-based nuker. And Crocmar is pretty good. You can have that sort of longer control type fight with Timid and Crocmar sort of nuking them down. It actually works well. And Crocmar buffing up Timid, that helps a lot too. So there's some interesting stuff going on there. But yeah, look, you like I said, it's basically 5% chance if you get a legendary that it will be Crocmar this weekend. I think it's a good thing, to go for. So yeah, like for me personally, I'm going to go in. I'm probably going to pull the minimum number of sacreds to get the fragments for Timid. And if I happen to get a legendary, that's great. If it happens to be not Timid, if it happens to be Crocmar, that's great as well. Yeah, 2x sacreds, it's a good time to pull sacred shards. Although it is, like I said, why I'm going for just the fragments, it's worthwhile saving your sacreds for guaranteed events like Hash of the Rye, for summon rush events as well. That can give things like there could be, they do them fairly frequently now, events for souls where you need to, maybe pull shards. Summon rush might be baked into a soul chase event. So all these things that are worth considering. Let me know, what are you going to do about it this weekend? What do you think about it? I am curious. But yeah, that is the news list. Thanks for watching, and I'll definitely see you for shard pulls on Friday. Fingers crossed we get some luck. I'm basically at reset my mercy completely after our shard pulls yesterday for Kaja. So it's a pretty great time when you're no mercy built up at all to go for your sacred or any shard type in a 2x event. It's a pretty good time to pull. So I'll see you for that. Thank you, and see you soon. Goodbye.